Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Addicts Advocate. I am your host, Dusty Dean, and it is my pleasure to welcome Dana Hargus to the show. How are you, Dana?
I'm great. Good to be here.
Thank you for spending a Saturday with me today talking all things recovery related, whether it be trauma recovery, whether it be addiction recovery, PTSD, anxiety, depression. We have a lot of things that we're going to dive into this morning, and I'm really looking forward to this because you are operating a center out of Oklahoma that focuses on these things specifically. And from what I understand, you're dealing with a lot of the attempts of trying to calm the nervous system. I found that was a really striking comment that you made to me because I truly felt like I experienced something with a nervous system dysregulation, especially after having lost some businesses and filed for bankruptcy back in 2008. Um, I was fried. I mean, I'd felt like such a failure. I was so stressed. I was so just trying to be the man that I felt like I was failing to be for my family, and just all these things. I mean, just took a toll on me physically. And and of course, when you don't have the correct coping skills to deal with these things, what ends up happening is you use the wrong coping skills. And coping mechanisms, and you end up maybe making essentially the situation worse. And I think we're too far along in society. We talked about this before the show that we have all the tools. We should have the empathy. We should understand now in society what's going on with people, and we should help them. And unfortunately, even though we're aware of it, we still feel like we're falling short. There's too many people still suffering in this world that don't need to be, and we need to change that. So I truly appreciate the work that you're doing out there in Oklahoma, and I'm truly interested in knowing. Explain to me more. What are the techniques that are going on now that you're finding have been helpful for people?
I want to start with just a little bit of where I've been so I can kind of like draw the picture of how I got here. I was a public school teacher for 9 years, and mostly I worked with children with significant emotionally disturbed. We would, in Oklahoma, we call the special education. Many of the kids I worked with were delinquents or had significant emotional impairments. And then I'm also an adoptive parent and an adoptive grandparent. So my life has been full of children that are dysregulated in ways that sometimes we cannot imagine. When you see children that have committed adult, and I say children, they were like 13 to 18, but that have committed adult crimes with no remorse, or children who for no understandable reason will tear your whole classroom apart, hurt somebody, and throw a chair through a window when you were just trying to do an assignment. Like it just, I think it alters who you are. And my heart's desire is to find solutions that matter. It was like even in the classroom, I was constantly changing things, shifting things, practical things like figuring out fluorescent lights caused more bad behavior. We would turn the lights off and my behaviors would go down. And we just all these different things I did then. And then I had one of my adopted kids was struggling a lot. And I began to hear about biofeedback. And I thought, what is this? And I found two people in the state of Oklahoma. This would have been in 1999, probably. I found two people in the state of Oklahoma doing biofeedback. And I called them and they said, oh, this would help your son so much. And it was, they wanted me to come 2 or 3 times a week at $125 a session. And I had small children. And then I had my son that was a little older that was struggling. And I thought, there's no way I can do this. Like, one, I had no money. But two, it was just like, even if I had the money, I couldn't manage my life and do this. So I just kept calling people. My husband would say, who did you call in California? Because this was back when you had a phone bill with like all the numbers on it. For those of you that aren't very old, you won't understand that. And I'm like, I'm trying to figure out if this biofeedback thing is for real. Like, I need to know, because if it is, I'm going to do something different. At the same time, I was working on my master's in counseling, educational counseling, not necessarily for sure I would be a therapist or anything, the more research I did, the more I thought my son could benefit from this. And so I finally just made the plunge and said, I'm going to do this, and went from educational counseling into licensed counseling, because you had to have a license to do biofeedback. So I got that completed pretty quickly because I had a lot of work done, and I headed off to training to do biofeedback, and I quit my job and said, I'm going to do this differently. Well, actually, I had to go under supervision. That took a year and a half. So after the year and a half of being a counselor and being supervised and continuing my journey of just trying to figure out, what is this? How do I do it? And how do I make a living at it? I went in to the training, and I made the single biggest purchase I'd ever made outside of a car or a home. I was like, kept calling my husband, are you sure? And he's like, well, you have to now. You've quit everything. You've got to do it. So I did. And I brought the equipment home and set it up in my living room. And my son was probably 14, and he was out of control. And his, like, looking back, when I think of what I think now, his nervous system could not settle. He did not sleep. He did not eat enough. He did not stop talking. He did not stop moving. He was a very sweet child, but he was out of control. He did not want to. He was always sorry, but he did things like got on an oil well and had his 4-year-old brother with him when that happened. And the arm of the oil well broke and slung him across the pasture. Like, I just have to think that's the hand of God, because his 95 pounds did not break the oil well. It was something all the time. The school called me all the time. And he was on a very low dose of medication. And when I took him off it, I knew it didn't make him better, but it kept him from being so difficult. And when I would take him off, the school would call and say, you should come get him because he's having a hard day. So we were just circling through that. And I spent that summer every day. I did 40 sessions of biofeedback with him. At the beginning, we did this test. It's an old test, but basically it tests your ability to pay attention. And his was so poor that it was unscorable. Like, he just got, like, because it was supposed to be comparing him to other boys between 14 and 15 or something, but his just came back with unscorable. I did 40 sessions in a row, and I was thinking, like, okay, like, I feel like he's better. And my mom's like, I think he's better. But I'm like, well, what if this is just like what I want? Because I'm starting this new business and I'm going to do all this in the fall. So I regave the test, and he scored within normal limits. And I gave the test the first time on medication and the last time off medication. So I was overjoyed. And he headed off to ninth grade. And for the first time ever in his entire, like, he came to me when he was 8. For the first time ever, he did not get, I didn't get any phone calls. It's never had I gone a week without a phone call, ever. He got on the roof of the school. He left. We're not sure where he's at. We can't, like, it was something. And like I said, there's never malice. Never. It was just, I was thinking, I wonder if you could see our house from here. You can. Like, that's why he got on the roof, just to see if he could see. And like, all of those things stopped. Like, not that he wasn't still who he was. He still had significant learning disabilities, but those things that were just in response now, what I think, to his outlandishly ramped up nervous system, stopped. And he was more reasonable, and the school, I'm not kidding, the school never called again. Like, we made it all the way through high school. He was still in special classes, but he went from 5 classes to 2. Like, and I'm not trying to say that he became a genius. He didn't. But his listening ability improved to the point that with modifications, he could function in the regular classroom. And before, he just couldn't. He couldn't be still, he couldn't listen, and it just even felt like he couldn't learn. So that was kind of my foundation for, like, wow, if I can do this for my kid, what might I be able to do for everybody else? So I went into I left my job. I got licensed and left my job and started my own office. And I had good experiences. and I got busy pretty quickly. And then I moved into a larger space. Like I said, that would have been about 2000. And for years, it was like me and a friend, and then me and another friend, and then me and another friend. But now, 25 years later, there are 13 of us who do biofeedback, and we schedule between 1,000 to 1,300 appointments a month. And most of the people do biofeedback, but we all are counselors. So we do therapy, and then biofeedback is our modality, just like you would do cognitive therapy or play therapy. So, and then I have to say that how biofeedback was in 1999, 2000, and how it is now, like for back when I saw my son, there's no comparison. The computer gives you information back about your brain. So nothing goes into your head. There are electrodes on your head, nothing's going in, but your brain waves are going into the computer. And then way back then, you were watching this antiquated Pac Man. It was so, and it beeped. Like every time your brain did what you wanted, it went beep, 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 and the little Pac Man ate the dots. And then when your brain slipped off course and did something you didn't want, the Pac Man would turn black and it would wait. And then you would correct and then it would move forward. And the time between something in your brain and something on the screen back then, like the response of the equipment, was about 3 seconds. So the brain did something, and about 3 seconds later, the machine was able to say you were right or you were wrong with those little cues, just that simple little Pac Man model. Now the response time is 300ths of a second. So it's like real time. And we've learned so much about where the electrodes are on the head and in terms of frequencies. Used to, we rewarded at frequencies of like 12 to 15, 15 to 8, like SMR beta waves. Now we're rewarding of frequencies of 0.0000001. That's our bottom number. And amazingly, most people are there. I would love to know if the fact that we are rewarding, like the majority of my day is spent lower than 0.0001 with everyone, and used to be rewarded high. Yes, the technology is better, we've learned more, but I also wonder if it's not a societal condition that everybody needs to be calm to that degree. And the fact that zero point zero 0.01 is different, completely different than 0.001, which is completely different, and on you go. Like those frequencies are very, very calming. I don't know if we needed that kind of calming 25 years ago. I suspect, that we probably did, but who knows? Because you can't know what you don't know. But the world is too overstimulated. The world is out of control. And in response, we are out of control. Like we are absolutely spinning all the way from the smallest among us to the oldest among us. And there are things that we will never talk better. It will never happen. We can talk and talk and talk and talk. The best therapist in the world cannot verbally calm your nervous system. They can give you tools. I believe in therapy. I'm a therapist. I absolutely believe in it. I do it 5 days a week. But you just won't fix things by talking and talking and talking. There are just many, many things. Addiction is one of those things that you will not make a difference just by talking it to death. Because if that nervous system is calm, we have now the capacity to make good decisions. We have the capacity to think first. And you think, why do people do what they do? Nobody does anything for nothing. Like everybody does what they do. When I sit and listen to people talk about how they feel, I am astounded. I've when those early years, because you don't think of like what a beautiful thing it is to get to know so much about people, like to get to know their heart and try to understand. And I've had a little anxiety. I've had a little, I have a lot of body tension. I've had things in my life. I've had some stress, but I would say that I haven't had any significant traumas, which I know is rare and an incredible blessing. But when I hear people you begin to see these people are internally out of control, and they cannot stop. And that is where biofeedback comes in. I feel like I've talked a lot, so you may want to stop me and ask questions.
No, this is wonderful. I appreciate all the information because my head is churning just from my own personal reflections and trying to manage, the weirdness of the body revolting, if you will, because that's in a sense what it feels like. Especially if you haven't always felt that way, but things environmentally, causally, traumatic experiences start changing the way that your nervous system regulates. I I mean, I was racing after I filed for bankruptcy, and it was literally one of the worst experiences of my life. I was trying to be a father, a husband. I was trying to basically hold the pieces together of our family, as best that the archetypical male is supposed to do in society, and I know that it was a huge toll on me, because unfortunately I didn't have really a sound job to go to from the businesses failing. I Fortunately my wife was working, um, and things ultimately by the grace of God worked themselves out as they always do. But when you're in the middle of it, I mean, I was going to chiropractors, I was going to doctors trying to figure out what was happening to my body because I literally just felt like I was short circuiting inside, and it was it was the weirdest feeling I'd ever had. Unfortunately, I didn't understand what was taking place with knowing the right steps to take to remedy. And I think that's the problem, right? We in society, we find that, we become intelligent because we recognize there's a problem. But then we have all the barriers in which we have in front of us before we seek help, whether it be shame, guilt, you know, financial constraints, ego, all these things, can sometimes, create barriers for us to go and seek help because, that's not the way I was raised. We stick it out, we tough it out, and it gets messy, right? It gets really messy. Um, you had talked about the light, just simple things like light inside of classrooms and changing moods. And I'm a big believer that light frequency, because again, I think at the end of the day, right, we're all ultimately, we break down to energy, that when we have light as energy coming at us, right, it's going to affect us. I definitely feel it. I feel sensitized to the seasons when the light changes. And I recognize that there's been a lot of studies lately about red light versus blue light, and LEDs versus fluorescent versus all these things are coming out, and you're just like, wow. Unintended consequences, right? That's what happens in our world, unfortunately, right? We try to solve one problem, we inadvertently create another.
Right.
Overstimulation, yes, I can truly appreciate that. And one of the things that you had said is that we as society try to medicate, um, to try to help people, and unfortunately, these medications have just gnarly side effects sometimes. Um, I recognize just through my own struggles that I wasn't going to be able to live my life without some sort of medication help. From just I deal with bipolar, and it was something that, again, with recognizing the elusiveness and the progressions of diseases in time, that sometimes what starts off really light becomes progressively worse. And as you're experiencing it, you don't recognize what's going on, and people around you don't recognize what's going on. And so you end up dropping, unfortunately, a lot of relationship landmines on people, and you start blowing things up, and just the dysregulation of our emotions. And so ultimately, the addictions were entangled for me in my struggles, right? The addictions and the mental health, they were all intertwined. And I got to a point where it was like, I recognized that I was probably going to kill myself inadvertently from my habits. And I was also destroying my life and everything around me in the process. Um, but I couldn't do it without some sort of medication help. And so that was a trial and tribulation, right? Trying to figure out those things to not become a zombie and not feel completely devoid of anything in life, but still, function and still feel happy and still not crave and not desire to go back to your old ways. And that's something that I really hope that people remove the shame and the guilt from whatever's ailing them and just go and get help, because there are so many people out there that understand. There's so many people out there that love you. that want you to feel better because they understand they've been in the pits of hell with you and they want you to feel in a better place. And I'm curious because I've always heard about biofeedback. I've even contemplated it myself. I know there's a lot of different types of, physical modalities that one can do to kind of help, but I guess I'm still at a loss for truly understanding what it is that somebody does in a biofeedback session. What is that? I understand the electrodes. I understand that there's obviously readings taking place, but how does the person engage in that session? What does that person do?
One of the best parts about biofeedback is all you have to do is sit and look at a screen, and
Okay.
anybody can do that. Like, and even I've even worked with people that are blind, and we use a tactile device and volume and sound. So
Okay.
it's basically just giving your brain information about itself in its current form. This is what it looks like. Somebody comes in, sits in the chair, and then a lot of decisions are made prior to that, but I won't go into all that. So it's like we're ready to do biofeedback. The electrodes go on the head, and I pull up YouTube. Same YouTube you have. The equipment applies a filter to YouTube, and the filter looks like a box that's going to come in and out. So as it comes in, it's going to cover your screen, and that is and the brain perceives that as negative, like don't do that. It's like the screen begins to be covered, kind of like when the Pac-Man turned black. The screen is covered, and that's the way the biofeedback says no, don't do that. And then the person's brain subconsciously, not consciously, it's not like, you get up in the morning and how many times should your heart beat, how much urine output should you have, how much, all these things that you never think about, your circulation, your, even the things going on in your brain. Biofeedback's like that. It's not, people try to make it a conscious thing. It's not a conscious attempt to change your brain. It's just allowing the brain to shift as the information is given. So the the brain does what's right, or what we're looking for in terms of frequency, and the screen gets wide, and now we can see um the whole picture, and that's like saying yes, yes, yes. So really, in that course of that 30 or 40 minutes, you get a series of yeses and nos. You get them through the screen. The volume goes up and down, not dramatically. Most people never notice the volume shifts. They never even notice it, but their brain knows. The brain absolutely knows that is me, and I am doing that. I have worked with children as young as 3 months old. Not often, but I had years ago a mother who had a child who had a brain injury at birth. And when you laid him flat on the floor, there was like this much space between his back and the floor. Like his little body was so spastic that it wouldn't go flush with the floor. And like I said, this is not what we do normally, but the mother was extremely educated, and she just said, "I know you can help my child." And I said, "Well, I don't know. Let's see." I knew she would be very cognizant of the child. Like it's nice to have somebody who can talk to you. That's really a great thing. But I knew that this mother was obsessed in a great way with her baby and wanted all things good for him. And I didn't see him but maybe 5 or 6 times. But when we were done, he was laying flat on the floor. So we just calmed his little nervous system. And then his body was able to relax. So that is that in its simplest form. That child slept through most of the sessions. I probably had been working for a year or two, and I called and talked to people. Is this safe? And they said it's safe, but we don't know how well it'll work. I turned the volume up, and I used the tactile thing. So it like laid against him. And when he was doing what was right, it vibrated more. And when he was not, it vibrated less. How do you even tell a 3 month old? It's really good if it moves. Like, but he got
Wow.
better. He slept better.
Wow.
He rested better, and his little nervous system calmed down. And then best part was his body calmed down so he could lay comfortably somewhere. So to me, that's such an example of like the simplistic way it works. But nothing moves into your head from those electrodes ever. Like it's just output. It goes
Yeah.
from the electrodes through this amp into my computer, and then that data is used to give you feedback. We don't read the brain waves. We don't, like, a long time ago, there was more complexities. It is so simple now. Honestly, the technology got so fast that the things we used to do, we could do no longer. I could work in a 3-second window. I can't work in a 300ths of a second window. So now the computer itself does so much more of the work. You still have to know what you're doing. You have to know where the electrodes go. You have to know what the frequency is. You have to know when to change what. Like, because not all things are at one site. So you put the electrode somewhere and you figure out what's good, and then after a while you're like, okay, we've got 6 things we're working on, and 4 of them are gone, 2 are not. Where might these be on the brain? And then there's like maps of the brain, like a on piece of paper map that says this part of the brain does this and that part of the brain. So we start looking for the part of the brain that might need to be touched in order to get these final 2 things taken care of. But all the way along, we are calming that nervous system. Like, even while we haven't yet got to focus or motivation, or we aren't able to do, we are just saying, calm down, calm down, calm down. And people are astonished by how different they feel. Especially, it's interesting when people think they're okay, and then, and they're here because we see a huge variety of people. And a lot of them are just people that have stress and anxiety and a few problems. They just want to be better. And we do a lot of that. And so those people I don't think necessarily understand what they're coming in for. Because boy, when they leave, even after session 1, they're like, I don't think I've ever felt this way. I don't remember ever feeling this way. Now, that isn't the end, because the way biofeedback becomes permanent is you find what you need to do and you repeat it. Just like if you were going to learn to play the piano or learn to ride a bike or any other skill, repeat, repeat, repeat. And then eventually, where you have like a new baseline. If you think of it like an engine, some people are revved all the time. They idle so high. Yeah.
Guilty.
So you idle really high all the time, and you're just sitting there, and then something happens and it tips you over, but something might happen to your neighbor, the same thing, and they just roll with it. And you're like, why do I tip? And they just roll with it. It's that idling. So we lower the idle point. Like, over time, we show the brain, don't go back there. I believe that with most people, they will never return to where they were. Like, you get the brain to go, not that it might not come back up, but it's like some people are living here and they need to be here. And you just, over time, you pull down and you pull down. And then now when something bad happens, you edge up a little bit, but you're still in control. It doesn't leave you at a place that I can't handle this. People blow their lives up every day, literally, because they cannot handle the stress level that they're currently under at where they're idling from. And that's what you begin to see, you know, probably thousands of clients, and you just think, like, some of these people are out of control in a way that I have never comprehended. I was trying to think of interesting stories related to addiction. Addiction is really not something, it is something I feel like I'm good at. When I do it, I do really well at it. But in the past, a long time ago, I tried to work with some different people. I couldn't get them to show up. And I became very disenchanted with the addiction community, because I'm like, you people have to come for me to help you. So it's not that. So now when it happens, it it often happens on accident. Somebody comes in depressed, and then they say, hey, I take these pills and I would really like to stop. Or somebody comes in with some other thing, and then they express, I have this problem. And so I'm like, okay, great. Like, let's work on this problem. But probably this was so long ago, but it was something that I learned something from, that I just can't. It's probably been 23, 24 years ago. I was brand new, and I worked with any agency in town that would send me clients. I was just happy, and we still do. We see anybody who wants to come. But there was an agency that worked to get people back to work, and the people were very dysregulated, and they didn't have a job. And so they called and said, "We have this person. We would love to send her to you, and I'm going to call her Mary." And so that day, I walk out in the lobby, and I'm at a loss for her. Like, I can't remember the name on the schedule, but there's only one person sitting there. So I said, "Hi, I'm Dana. You must be the lady from, this agency." And she said, "Yes, I'm Loretta Lynn." And I'm like, "Oh." And it just really, I was so new and green anyway. So I was always anxious about someone new. And I'm like, "Well, come in." And she sits down, and I look on the schedule, and I'm like, "Hey, I thought your name was Mary." "Nope, it's Loretta." And I'm like, and she's very scary. She's got tattoos everywhere. She looks angry. And I was like, "Well, Loretta, what brings you here today?" And she starts cussing me out and tells me she doesn't know why she's here. And I'm like, "Well," and I said, "This is your counselor called from this place and said this." And then she eventually acknowledges that they won't keep giving her money if she doesn't come here. And I'm like, "Oh, I didn't know that." So I just get on the phone and put the lady on the speaker, and I said, I wanted to say your client, but I wanted to say Loretta, but I'm like, she won't know who Loretta is. So I'm like, "Your client is here, but she doesn't really know why she's here." And so the counselor goes on to say, which would have been really good information for me prior to her getting here, is apparently she is assaulting people. She's not able to keep a job. She's fighting with her boyfriend in the front yard. She's probably in her mid to late 50s. And she's been in trouble with the law. She's addicted to drugs and alcohol, like just all of this stuff. And she says she wants us to do some things for her, but in the past we've done things for her and they haven't helped. So I said, "Okay, thank you." And we hang up, and I start trying to win her over. And I'm like, "You're gonna have to be here anyway." So, and I wasn't supposed to be her counselor. They are literally hiring me to do biofeedback. So it was like, but I felt like we had to do some talking here to try to, get her to come over. And so she's very angry. And I said, "I don't, what do you want? Like, what do you want?" And she said, "I want you to sign the paper that I'm here, sign all my papers, and let me go." And I said, "Oh, I can't do that. I could never do that. That wouldn't be honest." And we keep going. Eventually I convince her to do biofeedback. I'm like, because I kept listening. I'm like, "I can help you sleep." And she's like, "I can't sleep at all." And I'm like, "I can help you with that." I guess so. I found some things that she got some buy-in. And I said, "They've approved 3 days a week. Can you?" And she's like having to ride public transportation. And we don't have good public transportation. It's like kind of like call a ride, but so you have to just call and this van comes, and it's like they pick you up, they leave you too long, it costs money, like all these things. So she's like, she said, "Well, how about we just do 2 times a week?" And I said, "That'll be fine." So we do biofeedback that day, and she said, "I think I feel different." And I said, "Great. Like, see you in 2 days." So she comes back and she's like, I did feel different." And I said, "Well, tell me what's different." We talk about that. We do biofeedback again. And this goes on a little bit, and she keeps showing up, but it's, her money's attached to it. So I knew that was high motivation because they weren't giving it to her if she didn't get her papers signed. So probably in the third week, she said, "Something happened." And I said, "What happened?" And well, she had already acknowledged to me that she went to this bar in town that I'd never even heard of. Like, it was just this little hole in the wall. And I asked someone about the bar, and they said, "Oh, that's the roughest place I've ever heard of. Like, it is dangerous to go there." And she said she went there so she could fight. And I said, "What do you mean?" She said, "Sometimes I just have to fight. And so I just go there because I know I can fight there." I mean, she was like my age now, and she was going somewhere just to fight. Like it's like you talk about needing to burn off that nervous system issue. Like she would just wear herself down. So we had talked about that and talked about how she wished that it wasn't that way, and it would just kept rolling on. So she said she walked out of she was walking down a sidewalk and a lady walked out of a jewelry store. And I said, "Oh," and then she said she was like you. And I said, "Like me how?" And then she said she was a rich bitch. And I said, "Oh, okay." And I said, "Well, what?" And then she said, "But no offense though, I like you." And I said, "Well, good. I like you too." And we just rolled on. And she said that they ran into each other on the sidewalk. She said, "We just bumped into each other." And she said, "I said, 'I'm sorry.' And she said, 'Oh, no, sweetie, you don't need to be sorry. I wasn't watching where I was going.'" And she said, she patted me on the arm. And she said, "At that moment, I realized that maybe the reason that people treated me bad was because I treated them bad. I've never told anybody I'm sorry before, and it just came out of my mouth." And so then we really got to talk about that, about why maybe she's had such a difficult life. And we talked a little bit about her trauma, and we really never, like, I talked to her a lot, but I didn't have near as many trauma tools back then as I do now. But in all honesty, I was like hired to do, she had a therapist. I was hired to do biofeedback. So it was like, but I just kept, trying to help her see. And I'm like, that is just so smart of you, Mary, to figure out that. And she's like, I just can't even believe that. It makes me think about my whole life differently. So during this time, she also acknowledged that she never saw her daughter and didn't get to see her grandkids anymore because she had acted so poorly. And so we kept talking about that and how sad she was. She got one house to clean, and this lady told her, "If you'll do a good job, I'll tell my friends about you." So we were talking about that. Then she said, "I told my boyfriend I'm not fighting anymore. If you want to fight, you have to move." She said, "We just fight in the yard all the time and the police come." And he said, I just said, "That's embarrassing. We're not doing it anymore." And he said, "Well, I don't want to fight either." So we just stopped. And like, I was like, "You haven't done it anymore?" Like, she never reported another and this was probably 8 weeks in, so like 16 sessions in. And this was really with our old technology. Like the technology is much improved. So at the end of the time of her sessions that they had allotted, she had called her daughter and talked to her, and her daughter said, "Let's keep talking, and if things go well, I'll bring the kids to see you." She was getting to see her grandkids again. The lady that she was cleaning for got her 5 more houses, and so she had a house every day of the week to clean. And her and her boyfriend, because they were making more money, they got a new house. She said, I and then right, like pretty quickly, I forgot about this part. Pretty quickly, she said, "This biofeedback is better than pot." And back then, pot wasn't legal in Oklahoma. It is now, but it wasn't then. And I said, "Yeah, and it's legal too." And she's like, "Oh, yeah, you would worry about that, wouldn't you?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm just always worried about the silly things." But she just eventually, she said, "I really don't even enjoy it anymore." And my theory on that is back to this up and down theory. It's like she was up here and she used it to get here, but now she's here. So when she uses it, she feels crummy. She doesn't like it anymore. She doesn't need it anymore. So that idea of what do we do with the nervous system? When we alter the nervous system, we change everything.
This is great stuff. Number one, I mean, one of the things that's just so remarkable to me is that it's instilling hope in people. People
Mhm.
are real time experiencing the changes and are just recognizing that they've slowed down enough to start processing things. I
Right.
mean, that's huge. Something came to my mind when you were talking, because I'm curious to know what your thoughts are on people trying to get themselves healthier through exercise, and maybe the inadvertent reality that they're driving themselves the wrong direction.
It can definitely happen. I feel like that anything, even positive things, can wind up becoming a new obsession. And and so I've seen exercise be wonderful. I love for people to walk. I love for people to lift weights. Lifting heavy weight is good. I don't think you need to do it 7 days a week. I don't think you need to do it for hours a day because then it's just a new addiction. Like it just becomes a new problem. But some level of movement and activity and something helping with flexibility is wonderful for the body and the brain. But but anything in excess, I don't think is good.
Yeah, that was kind of the route that I went when I was after my Chapter 7 bankruptcy. In trying to get my system regulated, I ended up started working out, and I recognized that kind of like this lady was dealing with, this need to feel like a fight. She needed to fight someone. I felt the need to lift heavy weights, and it was, I mean, to the point where, I mean, I could almost drive myself into injury with the insatiable need to do it, and I recognized that that was a negative thing in
Mhm.
my life because of just the way that I was driving towards it. Um, this has been wonderful. I've got so much good stuff. I'm really looking forward to people hearing about your services. I'm even going, wow, do I need to spend my summer in Oklahoma? I might need to come out for my summer spend in Oklahoma because I've thought about it, but I've never. I guess I kind of considered it kind of witch science, in a sense, just
Right.
because I was just unaware. But again, when you're desperate and you're looking for remedies, I'm willing to, people are willing to do anything. But I think that people need to become aware, especially with the range of experiences that you've already witnessed and just the benefits of this. I mean, from a 3-month-old to someone who, is now consciously recognizing why they're doing the things that they're
Right.
doing, even at a later point in life. These things are massive. It's nothing but positive growth. Um, what town in Oklahoma are you located?
We are in Ada, Oklahoma.
Okay. Hence the name, because I was curious on the name, Restore of Ada. So you obviously are a big stronghold in your community, really working on your community. I commend you for that. What size is the area? What's the population?
I think the population's about 35,000, but we have a
Okay.
lot of small surrounding communities.
Yeah.
So we we pull from a lot of areas, and honestly, we pull a lot further than that because most people that do biofeedback do it as a standalone service, and it's quite expensive. So, like the private practice we have here in Ada, we do it as a modality, so it can fall in with counseling, so people aren't having to just private pay out of their pockets. My new program, Restore of Ada, is designed very differently. It isn't something that's covered by insurance because of the fact that we do 5 months of biofeedback in 2 weeks. And that is not covered by insurance. Insurance doesn't cover rapid, like maybe if it was inpatient care, but I've honestly been thinking about Restore, not by the name. I didn't know what I would call it, but for at least 20 years, I thought there's a way to do this so much better. Like it needs to be done more quickly. You also need to make nutritional changes. You need to make lifestyle changes. You need to look at all these different parts of your life. And it's another thing we really look at is attachment theory and how we attach and how we were attached to our caregivers impacts is impacted by trauma, and then how you, by understanding that, can seek healing in that area of your life. So that's a big part of what we do with that initial 6 week online portion. The first 6 weeks are spent at home, and you receive information in the mail, and then the rest of it is done online. So it's really just getting you as prepared as you can be for the intensive 2 week portion that is spent here in person, where you get that 20 sessions of biofeedback. And then we have all these other technologies. We have frequency technologies. We have different things to help reset the nervous system. We talk about diet. We talk about movement. We talk about blood sugar, gut health. We just have all these different things that come into play. We make more of our feel-good hormones in our gut than we do in our brain. And people totally ignore the gut. We don't pay attention at all to what the gut does. That's foolish. It's foolish. Like, if lots of things could be solved by dealing with our poor gut health. So we give people the tools they need in that first 6 weeks, and then during that 2 week deal, it's 10 days, 9 to 3, Monday through Friday, 2 concurrent weeks. And then after that, there's some follow up. And we also have an online portion called Restore Plus. And that's just, it's like a monthly paid thing where you learn all the things that we learn. It's like, it obviously doesn't include the technologies and the biofeedback, but the practical portions of how do you begin to reset your nervous system or your child's nervous system? What kind of things do you need to understand about your body, about your attachment, about your mind, about your spirit? It's like, I feel like we are addressing things, mind, body, and spirit. If you ignore any piece of that, you are not going to have full success. And Restore is really not therapy. Like, it's like, it is more about that reset. And then a lot of things take place that are extremely therapeutic, but we are not doing standard talk therapy at Restore. Like, I believe in it. I do it. I do it all the time. But that is not what Restore is about. Restore is about resetting your body so you can have better relationships, so you can have better control of yourself, so you can make better choices. And then at that point, there will be some people will need to go to therapy at that point, but they'll be ready to participate in therapy. Therapy is just seeing a counselor and not making changes. It's not worth much.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's interesting because, like most recovering addicts say, recovery is messy. And,
Mhm.
to sit there and say, I've quit my addiction, so now I'm healed, it's a foolish assumption. And unfortunately, a lot of people go down that route. They think if I can just stop doing what I'm doing, then I have control of myself. And then from there, I can show the world how strong I am. And then 5 to 6 years later, I'll tell myself that I'm cured because look how strong I've held. And then I'll go back down the rabbit hole and start
Right.
my addiction again. Um, and yeah, I think when you start peeling back the layers of addiction, you do start getting into mental health. You start getting into body issues. It's everything becomes so intertwined that you can't help but start, really needing to look critically at, your past experiences and external influences, genetics. And
Mhm.
so I'm a big advocate for everybody to do all the things that is needed
Right.
to get yourself to a better place. But because I know just the revelations that I had from just being in a medically assisted detox and getting just some very mild medication that really kind of changed my regulation in that regard. It was a massive breath of fresh air. It was huge, and it was just like a weight coming off the shoulders, and everything became so light. um, and that's the one thing that I found that I always struggled with was that, if you try to be all things at all for everyone, then you end up being nothing for no one. And at the same time, you're running at such a high RPM that you're going to short circuit, you're going to fail, you're, and at some point your body's going to tell you, it's going to tell you one way, shape and form, even if you think that you are stronger than that. Because it's all intertwined, right? Our brain, our nervous system, like you're saying. Um, any other types of like ways in which you've helped people that have been shocking to you?
Oh, I've had lots of really cool experiences. I during COVID, where everything shut down, we did not shut down. I just kept saying we're essential. And nobody ever pushed the window, so we stayed open. But it shifted things. I had more time on my hands because we weren't doing anything else. And I had an opportunity to see a few children that were out of control. I'm kind of I've known for being able to pull a child out of the fire and get them on their feet again. And so they often different agencies will call and say, okay, They've had 17 blown placements. We don't know what else to do. Will you, see them often? And I love to do that because it's like watching a transformation that you can't imagine. And so one little guy came in and he had been placed in um, a program that basically the person who he was going to live with got paid a significant sum to have one kid, and she wasn't making it with him. Like he was not doing well, and he was extremely over medicated, and he walked like tipping to one side, and he had slobber coming down the side of his mouth, and he looked handicapped. Like that first day I met him, that was my guess, is he's significantly impaired. And so we did biofeedback, and I just was heartbroken at the state of this child, at the state of this poor woman who honestly wanted to do good by him, but felt like this is not going well. And I just said, how often can you come? And she's like, well, I only have money for twice a week. And I'm like, oh no, it's all on me. Just come. And so I saw him sometimes 7 days a week, sometimes more than once a day. I would just stay late, come early, come on the weekends. Like I said, nothing was happening because of COVID. It was like we weren't going to church, we weren't doing anything. So I'm like, let's just do this. And I and she contacted, and this is another problem, is just the foolishness of not understanding what we're doing and thinking you do. She contacted his psychiatrist and said, this is so and so. I'm taking this child here to do biofeedback. She's concerned that if she does a lot of biofeedback, that he's going to be over medicated. He was already over medicated. Because if you think the biofeedback and a medication can definitely have the same job. Like the medication's calming you down, the biofeedback's calming you down. So if you do biofeedback long enough, it stands to reason you will need less or none of the medication. But I can't make medication recommendations or anything. We just have to keep referring back to the doctor. So the doctor responded, and she wrote a good description of what we were doing and what she was noticing. And he responded, I think biofeedback works better with medication, but do what you want to. And I thought, do what you want to, what you like. And that's what he said to this foster mom. And I was like, and I kind of expressed, well, that's probably not the best. Maybe we could call pharmacists. Maybe we could, just get some other input here. And we rolled on. And I said, how about next time you come in, you bring him early in the morning and don't medicate him. Like this was early on. Just let me meet him without the medication. And he came in and he was like funny and witty. And I was like, wow, like it was astounding. Like I was so amazed. And so I was like, this is wild. And so they had a good day that day. And I guess she just didn't give it again. And then at some point she says to me, because they were coming in and he was just like way better. And I was like, I said something about it. She said, well, he said do what I wanted to. I just haven't given it to him again. And honestly, I feel like that could kill someone. He was on crazy amounts of medication. I see children on adult meds double the dose. It's like there's a problem, so we hammer it and then we hammer it some more and then we hammer it. Like that's insanity. And I see that as child abuse. Like there's nobody to advocate for that child and nobody even wants to talk to me about it. I call and they're like, well, the doctor doesn't really talk to counselors. And I'm like, well, can I leave a message for him? And try, like, it's horrible. The state of medication in children is heartbreaking. But so here we are. But what I also know is doing biofeedback greatly diminishes withdrawal you have from medication, because I've had many opportunities to do frequent biofeedback and people work with their doctor and get completely off of something that they've never been able to get off of before. So it does diminish that. But this little guy just rolled along and a lot of good things happened. But and that has been 5 years ago. But he is now functioning at normal intellect. He's lost about 30 pounds because those medications make you heavy and lethargic. And so, like, his academics are on par. He moved to another home. He is emotionally steady and totally unmedicated. And the last time I saw him, he ran up to me, and I'm like, "Who is this?" Because lots of people say, Miss Dana, like, I've been here forever. And apparently I don't change because everybody knows who I am. And I'm like, "Who are you?" And I'm so and so. And I'm like, "Oh my gosh, like last time I saw you, you were 12." So it's like that ability to regulate his nervous system is now a skill set he owns. Like, it's a beautiful thing to see somebody who is bound, frankly, for something really bad. He had spent months and months of the previous 2 years inpatient. Like, so he had been confined for months and months, and he was only 8, 9. Like, so this is going on everywhere. But and it's with I have more opportunities to do that kind of intensive thing with children just because those come my way. But I feel like at Restorative Ada, we can show that can be done with adults too. Like, it's just like the model hasn't really worked in a private practice setting, so this model will allow for that brief intensive treatment that will just be life altering.
Sounds amazing. Sounds absolutely amazing. I so commend you for the work that you're doing out there. Just liberating so many souls that are struggling and trying to find the light. And I appreciate what you're saying about the notion of of this hammering effect, right? Well, if it doesn't work, we're just going to keep pushing it in until it does work. In my own journeys, I find it remarkable that we have this segregation of psychology and psychiatry.
Mhm.
It's and just in interfacing with the subsets of professionals on psychology, it's just such a different interaction than I have with a psychiatrist. And I can tell you that of the 3 or 4 that I've had ever in my life from a psychiatry side, I sit there and there's there's just purely just a chemical perception of it, right?
Right.
It's just purely a chemical perception. And we know that that's just we're not that simple. We've never been. And so I find that remarkable that we have in some way in shape and form have changed the approach in that um because it's frustrating, right? I mean,
Right.
good.
The medical model is highly uninterested in other models.
Yeah,
Like, it's just there's just a total lack of interest. I mean, and I've only ever had one psychiatrist, and it wasn't a psychiatrist, it was a psychiatric PA. That's the single in 25 years that I've ever had a conversation with, ever. And I pursue the heck out of people. I am obnoxious because I just think I know this person and you don't. Like, I've spent
yeah,
hours oftentimes again with children. It's like there's a new foster home, there's a new DHS worker, there's a new everything. Me, a paid professional that sees somebody 1 hour a week, has known the child longer than anybody in their life. That's outrageous.
right.
Like, how can we have a system that functions in that fashion? So
Yeah,
I'm like, I feel like I have some level of responsibility to try to say, this is my observation. This is what I see. This is where I think we should go. Do you know that we have, out of the symptoms for this medication, the side effects, they have 17 of the side effects out of 20? Like, that's a problem. Like, we need to stop. And I have had a doctor tell a worker after I sent a letter, and I said, I ask you to read the letter, read it out loud. Like, and he said, all these medications have these side effects. There's nothing I can do about that. And the side effects are suicide, homicide, rage. Like, oftentimes the side effects are worse than the
right,
problem we're treating.
right. No, I hear you, and it's frustrating to me because especially because I've experienced some of that from a side effect and I completely lose trust in the psychiatrist at that moment.
Right.
And especially when it comes to their response to me talking about the side effects. If you're nonchalant and are just like, okay, well, let's just stop and let's just start plugging and playing, I sit there and I go, is this voodoo science? Because at some point I go, you guys don't even know what you're doing. You're just throwing darts at a wall. And that's very concerning. And so if I lose trust in you, then I'm just going to go back to the things that I knew that helped me manage my own survival. And that's not the way we want to go in this. I have a stepson whom um, has, it falls underneath a blanket, if you will, of, ADHD, learning disabilities, kind of undefined, but he spent his education in an IEP program, an individualized education plan
Right.
with the state, right? Because, and what's interesting to me is I reflect with some friends, I said, back in the day when I was growing up and the classroom environment was such that you kind of had like three different sets of classes for any given age, right? It was basically the what was classified as the normal, if you will. Those that were obviously severely handicapped, mentally retarded, right? Obviously had the very much a special needs class. But then you had like this problem child class, right, where the kids just kind of didn't fall in, they were the square peg for the round hole, and we never knew how to deal with them. So we kind of just said, well, you know what you need? You need more discipline in your life. You need a drill sergeant for a teacher that's going to basically make sure that you all sit down and shut up and do your work, and there's no deviation. You have to be compliant, and we've come through time to recognize that, well, no, those people are a whole different subset that we need to take care of as well. And there's many different approaches that we can do that's going to actually be fruitful for them.
Right.
And unfortunately, right, but as parents, if you have the playbook that your parents gave you and it doesn't work with your kid, you kind of end up going, well, what do I do now? And that can be frustrating because you feel, again, I'm going to force you to conform because you're just a kid that doesn't want to, you have a little bit of authority issue, and what kid doesn't? So you just think of it as a normal growing up reality, but no, this kid is actually different. He perceives, he looks at things differently, and everything that you're trying to do to help him is not going to work. And if anything, it's going to send him the wrong direction. And my wife and I dealt with that, and we look back now and we thank God that we feel like we didn't leave any lasting damage on him. And he's thriving. But we also started working on trusting ourselves a little bit and recognizing that, hey, we unfortunately are dealing with doctors sometimes that are just sitting there and giving 5-minute diagnoses and throwing the kid on a pill and basically being done with it. And that's irresponsible to me, completely irresponsible. What do you think are obstacles in the type of work that you're doing? Are there any, or is it just really a fine tuning in your process to help somebody get better? Are there resistances to this? Are there things that don't work?
You know, I I really see this as I which I've always said. People have years called me with questions like, "Does biofeedback help?" Like fill in the blank. And there's just rarely a time that I say no, because
Okay,
what isn't brain connected?
right.
Nothing. Everything is brain connected. When you think about pain in the body, the more you hurt, the tighter you get, and the tighter you get, the more you hurt. And biofeedback just steps in the middle of that. And when you relax the brain and calm the nervous system, the body relaxes. And then it's like you can go from this and just living in this state. There are so many people's muscles are all just like this to this. Because as your brain calms down, your body will calm down. And you mentioned attentional problems. How ADHD is a significant issue, and we need to look at, and now we've re-diagnosed it as ADD. I don't know why we took the H out, but they changed that DSM often. But it's a significant issue that is a brain issue. If you look at autoimmune disorders, anxiety, how many people have so much anxiety they can't go to work? PTSD, how many like emergency workers
Mm,
cannot go back to work? That is all brain stuff. All of
Yeah.
it. If you calm the brain, you calm the body, and the likelihood you get the outcome you want goes up. One of the biggest things we're doing is improving sleep. Sleep impacts everything. And we have become so accustomed to being poor sleepers or medicated sleepers. Medicated sleep is not the same as unmedicated sleep. A drugged sleep does not give the body the same impact as a non drugged sleep.
Yeah.
How many people are on Ambien? It's supposed to be a short term med. They've been on it for 20 years and they get 4 hours a night from their Ambien, but without it, they get none. So they opt for they opt for the Ambien. There are
Yeah.
just so many components to the brain health, but there's really nothing that I would say, oh, there's just no reason to give this a try. You know, autism and like depression, bipolar, like if you think of it, like what could you think of that you're like this has nothing to do with the brain?
Right.
There's not, you know,
Yeah.
it's just getting people. I feel like the big thing, like, I always say there are people that restorative ADA is not for, and that would be people who don't want to change. Because
There you go.
biofeedback is wonderful, but you need to be prepared by making some lifestyle changes. If you're drinking 3 monsters a day and you
Right.
show up to do biofeedback, I that is not conducive to my best. It's like I cannot give you everything I want to give you if you haven't prepared yourself for the rapid change that is about to take place.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting you say that because we don't, a lot of times in our daily habits, we don't recognize that we're inadvertently altering ourselves. And whereas we just think that we're taking ourselves to a baseline, no, we've moved our baseline and that baseline is now unhealthy. That's the
Right.
way that you need to function. You're operating at the wrong frequency, right?
And that happens all the time, all day
Right.
long.
Yeah. No,
Screen,
I've,
caffeine, food,
yeah.
like the way you spend your time,
Mhm.
being awake when you ought to be asleep.
Right. Yeah. No, it's crazy. One of the things that you touched on that was it kind of something happened to me recently where I had a weird trigger. I had a triggering event, and it was something that I wasn't expecting to take place. But when it took place and I reflected on it, I recognized that the way that I'd coped with that same type of experience in other situations was, obviously it was an addiction. It was an addiction based, remedy, if you will. But I was recently up in Tahoe with the family, and I we had a really bad snow drive home. And I was able to be inside of a casino, not drink, have a good time, be responsible, spend time with my family, enjoy all these things. And none of those things were triggering for me, but it was the drive home because of the stress from the snow.
Right.
And I recognize that on top of that, that I am in a work environment that for the most part I have a work environment that can provide immediate amounts of high stress. And with if failure is in the forefront of the job duty that I'm dealing with, I have the ability to affect a lot of people in the work that I do. And so those things, right? Having stressful events at work and then just kind of feeling out of sorts, right? Typically, what does somebody do? Well, I'm getting off at 5. I'm heading straight to the liquor store, and that's how I'm remedying my problem. Or I'm going home, or I'm going to go straight to the gym and I'm going to lift weights for 2.5 hours to get
Mhm.
all that energy out. And you go, well, you're basically, there's two forms of kind of destruction there that you're doing inadvertently. Um, so yeah, people, again, I think that we are definitely becoming more aware as a society, I think in a lot of different ways. And I think that one of the greatest things that anybody can do for themselves is work on themselves, right? And change themselves, right? I mean, we have this notion of going out and changing the world. Well, it's like, let's start internally first, because that's, one of the greatest gifts that we can do. Dana, this has been absolutely wonderful. I'm at a point where I feel like we've talked so much and we've got a lot of great information here. And I think that I'm going to do my best to let the world know about what you're doing.
Great. Thank
There are
you.
so many wonderful things that I think you're doing. And there's so many people that you're affecting positively for a lot of different reasons that we need to be aware of this stuff. There's too many people suffering that have the opportunities to get better. And let's stop the madness, right? Let's stop the insanity.
Right. I agree.
Um, Dana Hargus of Restore of Ada, and you are out in Ada, Oklahoma. You've been
Correct.
doing this now for over 25 years?
Well, I haven't been doing Restore for 25 years. I've had biofeedback and counseling for 25 years.
Yeah,
Restore Data is a new venture. So,
it's a very intensive venture.
yes,
That
it
if
is
somebody's willing to undergo it, it will be transformative.
for sure.
Dana, I appreciate your time this morning, and I hope that you have a blessed rest of your weekend, and you continue to do the great work that you are doing out there.
Thank you. I appreciate being here.
Have a good day. Okay.
Okay.
Bye bye.